Okay, welcome to McCarthy Performance. We're going to make a little video, quick one today. I'm going to cover a few things on big block Chevrolet heads. Now, I've been building big block Chevrolets since the 80s. I started doing it professionally probably 25, 30 years ago. And I guess that means what I was getting paid to do a job that I normally was doing for free when I was a kid. There's some people on the internet that are terribly misguided. And I guess that's okay, and I'm not here to smash anybody. I'm just here to maybe give them some honest opinions and some facts, and whatever they decide to do with them is up to them. Now, this head here is just for eye candy. We may get to that, but this is a raw head, and I usually finish machine them, which is valve jobs, guides, and surface them. Obviously, that's not an acceptable surface. We're going to talk about iron GM production heads. This is a newer head, and this was primarily used on GM aftermarket crate motors and 502 boats. So you'll see this in a 502, you'll see this in a 454 HO engine, and this is a vintage closed chamber head. I believe this is about a 68 head. Okay, let's go over some of the stuff that people are getting concerned about. This is water. Water goes through here. That's normal. This rough casting in here is normal. This rough casting in here is normal. In here, you know, these are a little bit smoother, but to have something rough in there is kind of normal. They're rusty. Why? Because water goes through these, you know. Sometimes antifreeze, sometimes water. If they were in a boat, water goes through them. Hot tank will clean most of that out. Now, bacon blast will burn most of the stuff out, and whatever the blast can get into, it'll clean it out. But usually, either way you go, when the heads are finally assembled, they'll probably be flushed. That's not anything to get concerned about. And you see here, you know, guys want to die grind that out and smooth it out. Well, you know, you can do that, but GM didn't. You know, these things weren't built like a Rolls-Royce aircraft engine. They're production engines. This stuff in here, that's all normal. It's rough because it's as cast. It's just the way they are. They're not, you know, they're not pieces of finely tuned into, you know, into a diamond. They're just production heads. That's all they are. You know. You know, this is typically, the surface on here usually isn't the best, but it ain't horrible. But you know, usually with an air board you can file it. If it doesn't clean up good enough, this is acceptable to mill. I've milled a bunch of them. You know, guys are getting excited about the spot face on these. Well, GM spot faces them, they don't care. If there's a little bit of edging on here and it chips away, so be it. But I mean, you can look at these and you can most certainly see that they don't come through the factory pristine. You know, these are production run heads. But I tell you one thing about these production run heads is they will fit. You can buy some Chinese aftermarket heads thinking you're going to eliminate a guy that does the machine work and say, well, I'm just going to get away from that. You're going to spend just as much money on some Chinese heads if you don't get the right ones to make them work. We can get into that in another video. Guide bosses, you know, them are step down. That's pretty much how they look. Is the machining pristine on these? No, it's not. But you know what? It works. You can see that these heads have been cut for a positive type seal, which would be a positive type seal like that, but a bigger diameter. Well, no, I'll be damned. Same diameter. Okay, these are these seals are what I use for a triple or a double spring. So these take up a lot less overall diameter than, like say, that's a factory 502. That's what that would have had on it, or this one. depending on what year the head was. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to say on that. Now, you can look at these things and you can pick them apart because, like I said, it's a production run head. How much you want to get into it is up to you. Um, let's talk about guides. Well, if you buy a head and one of these is knocked off, which I've had a bunch of them, there's a bunch of ways you can do it. What we do is we core ream that and we put a false guide in it. And I don't particularly care for that terminology, but that's what they call it. On a big block Chevrolet from GM, these are not integrated. Somebody said they were integrated. They are not integrated. This is a liner. These are all liners here. These are all liners. And this is actually for aluminum head. And if it's broke down, a lot of times I'll put these in. They're nicer, and I like bronze over iron most of the time if I can use it. This is a complete replacement. And this is in bronze. And this is for 11/32. Most big blocks, all big blocks from the factory, are going to be 3/8. So you go to a smaller stem, less weight. Usually do that on most of them if we're going to put guides in them. Okay, and here's a factory replacement. And you can drive these out and you can take them out and replace them. Now, the thing about driving them out and replacing them is a lot of times these weren't drilled on center. These were drilled on a multi-spindled machine. If you put a complete guide in, you may expect to have to do a bigger valve. You may get lucky, but chances are you're going to probably have to go to a different valve size, diameter. And with these heads, it's kind of a problem because these are 188 valves. But you can put seats in them. You can do a lot of work to these, and you just spend a lot of money. I'm not telling anybody out there that you're not going to spend some money on these heads, especially you start talking about a head that's from 72 or earlier. You're going to probably have to put a few helicoils in it. You're probably going to have to put a few seats in it. You're going to probably absolutely put guides in it because big blocks are terribly hard on guides. I learned that a long time ago. The geometry isn't quite as good as it could be from the factory. And, how much work you want to do to these, it depends on your budget. But if you think you've got a 65 Chevelle and you want a set of, say, old 215 head or an old rectangular port head, and you absolutely find it and you got the numbers and they match, you're gonna put some money into them unless you find some really super nice heads, because you got to remember these things are beat on hard and beat on for a lot of years. And some of them, when they got beat on, sometimes they didn't come back. Sometimes they blew up. And this particular head here it's got trash on it, and that's probably from a valve coming apart or something in its lifetime. This head's rebuildable, and it's rusty because it's iron rust. I can put it in a hot tank; it'll clean all this up. So. Sometimes it ain't worth going through all these pits. Now, when you look at a head, you want to make sure that the valve seat area isn't excessively sunk in. And that you want to make sure that, when you're checking the spark plugs holes, that you got the right spark plug. Because GM used two different plugs. All the early ones used a long reach, like RN12YC, R1112YCs. And that's one of them things that you're gonna have to look up the part number, or I should say the spark plug number, and see what year and what plug you need. Now, if you look closely in this head here, this is a newer head. Right there. It's got a little taper in there. See that taper? That's for a short reach tapered seat plug. And that would be this plug here. which should be an RN8 or R44 RTS or something like that. I don't know. I used to put plugs in all day at the boat marina, but I don't do it anymore. But I think it's an R8, and then it's an R44 TS and an AC, but it's a short reach tapered plug. Okay, now if you look down this one here, there's not much taper. It's pretty much a flat area down here, and that's for the washer on this plug here. So you know, you got to check all this stuff, and you know why the head's off. You know, you check it and make sure, you know, the plug screws in there. If you put the wrong plugs in a big block, you'll have a problem. They'll hit the piston. If you've got any kind of dome in there. If not, and you're lucky and you don't have a dome in there, you're just going to have a plug that's going into the head way too far. But, you know, this is just a kind of a quick video here. I don't want to get into the all the way out in the weeds unless somebody asks, but you know, this head's already had a liner put in it, a bronze liner. You can see the chamfer up here. You can see maybe the brass. That's not a bad way to go. That's a doable situation. But normally in the shop, what I prefer is I'll put a whole guide in there. You know, and one of the reasons why is I'm not set up for these type of liners. And you can see that this has been cut down. So if you get a head and it's one of these is busted off, it's not the end of the world. It can be replaced with whatever your machine shop guy decides to use, you know. I guess that's kind of what I wanted to say about it. You know, you know, machine work costs. It takes time and it takes money to do them right. You're looking for number matching heads. You're going to spend a lot of time on them unless you get really lucky. I guess that's pretty much all I really wanted to say about this. Of course, when you're looking at heads, you sure don't want them all eroded in here. But you know, the combustion ring is out here, so if you get a little bit of this, well, I call it peppering. If you get this peppering here and you still can see where the head gasket goes, that's not an issue. It's not pretty. It's not the end of the world. If there's a chunk missing out of the valve seat, that's a whole different story. You know, you find a set of heads with the right numbers and everything on them that you want. Are you going to have to put exhaust and intake seats in it? You very well could. And if it's got exhaust seats in it, put in it already, then you know, you take them out. Well, you have to replace them. Depends on how many valve jobs. You got to remember these heads have been around. They were going to have a few valve jobs. Some of the guys that did the valve jobs might not be really giving a rat's rump what he's doing. You know, he just might hurry up and bam bam, there you go. He's not going to worry about if one valve is sunk down 40 or 50 thousandths more than the rest to get him to clean up, so you don't have to put a seat in it. You know, people haven't changed much. You know, money back in the 70s and 80s was just like money now. You know. Somebody's going to call you up and say, hey, I can sink your valve 50 thousandths or put a seat in there and it's going to cost more money. They'll say, oh, I just drive it every day. I could care less. I just want it to work, and it'll work. It's not really right, but it'll work. So that's what you got to remember about these heads is, you know, they weren't no polished jewels. They were just running out GM, popping them out like hotcakes. You know, they can be tuned up and cleaned up, and you can spend time on them, make them nice, but right out of the box, they usually need some work. But you could get into the aluminum heads, and we can get into it on another day. But some of the aftermarket aluminum heads you're getting from China, everybody says, well, it's a swinging deal. I can buy them heads for the same price I can buy the original old heads for. Well, your old heads are going to need work. Guess what? News update. You're going to need work on the aluminum heads, too, because they're not even close most of the time from the factory over in China, you know, and you're talking about a head that was made for a GM head made by GM. So, you know, yeah, they got CNC machines and everything, and they can do maybe some of the stuff a little bit more precise, but I'm here to tell you it's really not the case. But Well, thanks for watching my videos, and there is a few videos on my site with me actually machining these heads. All the aftermarket iron heads, they have, some of them do have integrated guides in them. So we're talking about GM heads today. We're not talking about Merlins or Dart iron heads. Or I think it was Pro Top Line made an iron head too. I don't even know if you can get iron heads anymore. All that stuff has kind of gone by the wayside. But anyways, thanks for watching.